What's going on, everybody? Today I want to take a closer look at the balance update that'll be rolling out live next week that features updates to the following 6 champions: Annihilus, Human Torch, Ebony Maw, Cull, Obsidian, Namor, and Invisible Woman. You might be wondering why these 6 champions. Well, Kabam's goal with this set of balance changes was to release these characters and then in the months following their release, assess the data and figure out if they hit their intended mark with each one of these champions, or whether or not they are underperforming, or in some cases overperforming as well. So right off the bat, the 2 champions that Kabam sees as overperforming are Cull, Obsidian, and Namor, and they are going to get toned down a little bit. Really, it's not a big change. We will go through each one of the changes individually, but you might be curious about compensation if you decide that you want to rank these champions down. It's going to be a little bit different than in the past. You're not going to be given rank down tickets, but here's how it's going to go down. On February 5th, that's when this update is going to go live, and between February 10th and 24th, you'll be able to sell your Cull, Obsidian, or Namor. No other champions, just these 2. You'll be able to sell these champions. And then on March 9th, you'll be given back the champions at rank 1, of course, along with any other rank up resources that you gave them, which in this case includes Awakening Gems and Signature Stones as well, something that they have not done in the past with the rank down tickets. Now, before we get into the first champion that we're going to take a closer look at, I just want to say, in general, I am a fan of balance updates. Almost every single game that I play has some sort of balance updates. And I do think that balance updates make the game better, but not always. And in some of the cases here, I kind of disagree with the changes that Kabam is going to make, and I'll explain as we get into that. But in general, I'm very open to balance updates, welcome them, and it's hard for me to play games that don't have balance updates. Okay, first one that we're going to take a look at, though, is Invisible Woman, who is actually not going to be changing at this time. The other 5 characters are, but Kabam have decided to not change Invisible Woman. They were taking a close look at her, and in the past, I think they might have posted that that they were going to be making some sort of changes to Invisible Woman, but upon looking at the data, they can see that Invisible Woman is a pretty strong defender. This chart is showing the top 15 defenders on the defensive tactic favoring small champions, and you can see Invisible Woman comes in 3rd with a defensive win rate of 75%. So a lot of people out there dying to Invisible Woman. She can be pretty tough for sure. Number 1 on the list is Domino. Number 2 is Korg, which is pretty interesting, seeing as Korg is not even a small-sized champion. I guess Korg is just that good as a defender, or maybe he's being used on some very difficult nodes. But Invisible Woman does come in 3rd, and from personal experience, I have seen her as the boss node in the master bracket, and I don't think I've ever fought her on that node, but I have seen some gameplay from alliance mates. And yeah, she can be pretty tricky, looking at the footage at least. Now, the reason why that she was even on this list here in the first place is Kabam is saying that she's not achieving her goal of being a sustained champion when on attack. They have some other info here, some other data showing that you know, they would prefer to see her numbers a little bit higher on attack, but they did also just release Mr. Fantastic, and they're going to be waiting until Mr. Fantastic is more common and see how that affects Invisible Woman's performance overall before they make some other type of balance adjustment, because they also want to avoid making her even more difficult on defense. So as far as what that synergy actually is with Mr. Fantastic, I think the one that they're mentioning here, the one they're talking about, is actually the entire Fantastic Four synergy that makes it so that her invisibility only has a 15% chance to unpause during a well-timed block. Her damage ramps up in a similar way to Stark Spidey. It's similar yet different, but while invisible, if she evades attacks or uses dexterity to dodge attacks, then she builds up debuffs on the opponent that is, again, it's different than building up poise charges, but it's kind of similar. It ramps up her damage as the fight goes on. However, if she loses her invisibility for any reason, she also loses any sort of damage that she's ramped up. So, yeah, in that way, she definitely differs from Stark Spidey. And I don't know if this synergy is really going to help a ton with that, because it's kind of counterintuitive to her playstyle. Parries are usually a very deliberate action in this game. There are times where we accidentally parry, absolutely, but for the most part, it's a very deliberate action. And while invisible, if you get hit in any way, and without this synergy, if you parry or even you lose everything that you've ramped up. And with this synergy, you still have a chance, even on parries, to lose everything that you've ramped up. So it feels weird to kind of deliberately roll the dice. But I also haven't spent a lot of time playing with Invisible Woman, and I do think that she has high potential. Any champion that has some sort of invisibility or phasing mechanic, I feel like Ghost has really kind of opened up that box. And yeah, I think that type of utility needs to be respected. And I grinded for Invisible Woman a long time ago, thinking that she would help me out in my itemless adventures. I just haven't had the opportunity to really practice with her or rank her up. But I can see the potential there, so I don't really mind that she's not being changed yet. But they are saying that they're going to do a general reassessment in the months after Mr. Fantastic's release. So if you're bummed that Invisible Woman is not being changed, well, there is hope for the future. Alright, moving on to the next champion here, who is Annihilus. Annihilus is performing very well as a defender. You can see some of these percentages are very high when it comes to Annihilus on defense. I don't think we even need to see this chart. If you fought Annihilus elsewhere in the game, outside of Alliance 4 even, you probably know that he's pretty tough to take down at times. And yeah, a few mistakes can get you trapped against the wall, and it can be pretty difficult to fight your way out of that. But offensively, his win rate is pretty low compared to the other champions, according to this chart. And his overall DPS is pretty low as well. So what Kabam is going to be doing is they're going to be finding a way to increase his effectiveness while attacking without increasing his effectiveness and win rate on defense. So what they're actually doing is they're going to give Annihilus more time to capitalize on his Furies he creates from his Special 2. They're doing this by increasing the Fury duration from Special 2 from 12 seconds to 18 seconds. And they also make note here saying that a single special attack from the opponent would waste almost half the duration. Annihilus' playstyle is very aggressive and would often leave his opponent with lots of power. And this is absolutely true. Annihilus, to stack the debuffs, you have to be aggressive with him. And even if you're just doing a regular 5-hit combo followed by Special 2, you're giving the opponent lots of power. And with Annihilus, you're more than likely going beyond that, doing 5-hit combo, parry, 5-hit combo, Special 2. Just really trying to stack as many debuffs as possible to take advantage take advantage of all the debuffs and get the most out of the Furies that you're converting with the Special 2. And with Annihilus' Special 2 in particular, it has a long animation to it, and the Fury timer starts as soon as you activate your Special 2. By the time your animation is done, the opponent is finally standing up. About 3 seconds have passed now, and again, you're baiting out a special. By the time the enemy throws their special, you might not even get a single 5-hit combo in with those Furies, or maybe you will get that one 5-hit combo, and that's about it. This will at least give you some more time to capitalize on that. And yeah, I think this is a great change overall. I think there's a lot of champions in this game that could benefit from just increasing the duration of certain abilities. So it makes me really happy to see that this is how they're going about changing Annihilus. I don't think Annihilus is suddenly going to be a super powerhouse champion, but he does have some pretty good utility to him, actually. If we take a look, Annihilus, he's kind of stacked in the way of immunities. If we take a look at the top bullet point here, it says he's immune to Incinerate, Frostbite, Cold Snap, and any effect that lowers or locks power. So not only are there some nodes that exist right now that Annihilus could be helpful for, but I could also see some just encounters in general in the future that drain power, or you need those immunities, and Annihilus could be one of the best, if not the best, counter to a very specific fight. We do have other champions with these immunities, especially Colossus just got updated and also has Incinerate, Frostbite, and Cold Snap immunity. And of course, there are a few other champions out there that have these, but it's just good to see that a champion that does have useful utility is going to be getting buffed offensively to make him a little bit more enjoyable to use when you do need to use him. I don't think he's going to be used all the time, but I can see him getting used. So it's pretty cool to see that. Yeah, he'll just be a lot more enjoyable to use overall. The second thing that they're doing for Annihilus is they're adding a timer icon to display how long the special one pauses stifles on the opponents. So I don't know how much of an impact this is going to have on Annihilus. I kind of want to look at the timer when it's released, but just in general, it's good to have this sort of visual representation in game. You know, this isn't the only game that we've ever played, and anyone who has played other games in the past, you probably are used to seeing timers on things, cooldown timers and such. And we do have timers in MCOC, but there are some times where we're without that information. You know, Stark Spidey comes to mind. When you use Stark Spidey's heavy attack, there's no visual representation on how much time you have left before you can do that heavy attack power drain again. And I can't say for sure, but I want to say that question has come up at Comic-Con in the past. I want to say maybe Cade in the past asked one of the character designers why there was no timer about Stark Spidey's heavy attack power drain. And I don't remember what they said, but it has to be an intentional decision, right? They have the ability to put these timers in game. Maybe they don't want to clutter up the UI, because in some fights it can definitely get cluttered up. Or maybe they didn't want Stark Spidey's ability to be used on cooldown. They just want it to be an emergency type thing. I don't remember what they said, but for whatever reason, there are certain things in this game that don't have good ways to display the time on certain abilities or cooldowns or anything like this. So the fact that they're doing this for Annihilus also gives me hope that they'll go back and maybe revisit some other characters and just find a way to better display that information in game. So the overall change to Annihilus, I don't think it's anything super crazy, but I'm very happy in the two ways they're going about changing this character. Okay, Human Torch, moving right along. In the interest of time, we're gonna kind of skip ahead past all this information here. It's a relatively simple change they're making to Torch. The rate at which temperature increases while charging heavy is increased by 25%, which is a nice little buff. They're saying here that this may seem like a small change, but he can now go from 0 to 20 temperature in approximately 2 seconds, which means he can reach max temperature from both a parry and from a special 2. And their intention with this change was not to make Torch stronger in the situations where he already excelled, like fighting Mystic champions, but to give him a little bit more firepower in the fights that he's, not so good in. And for some people, like myself, I would say this is probably not going to have too big of an impact on, my overall gameplay experience. I'm probably still only going to use Torch in the fights that he excels at, which, this particular change doesn't do a whole lot for. He already crushes those fights. He doesn't really need anything, right? But for the person that does use Torch more frequently, maybe it's one of your few higher ranked up champions, this is going to make it so that you can start a quest, pop your pre-fight ability, and then enjoy kind of getting that pre-fight ability back in the next match, even though it might not be the ideal matchup. He'll be a little bit better, and overall, I'm looking forward to testing it, because I do think it's going to make the gameplay with Torch just a bit smoother, and in general, the entire Fantastic Four team is really fun to play with. So overall, a very good change to Torch. Moving on to Ebony Maw. Ebony Maw is seeing the largest buff out of any of these champions, because they're not only buffing him offensively, but they're buffing him defensively as well. You can see here his defensive win rate when looking at rank 5s only isn't bad. It's above 50%, but compared to the 70+% that the other characters had, it's a bit lower than what they would like for Ebony Maw. And then offensively, they rip on Maw pretty hard here. They're saying practically useless. Put in perspective, Maw's damage output is so low that he's currently out-damaged by many 3 stars. And they're even saying here, this is actually pretty interesting, they say here that they're comparing his damage numbers to other champions that they also believe are in need of an update, which includes Abomination, Agent Venom, Cyclops, Daredevil, Karnak, Hulkbuster, Howard the Duck, Groot, Dormammu, and Drax, which Hulkbuster already is getting reworked pretty soon, so that's cool to see. But just these other champions, it's good. It's just good to hear them acknowledge it, you know. I think they've acknowledged it in the past as well, that, you know, a lot of these other champions are underperforming, and I'm sure it takes a lot of time and effort to. It's a long process to figure out how they want to rework, or in some cases just buff or add synergies to make these characters relevant again. But yeah, hopefully in the future they're able to update these champions. One thing that's kind of disappointing is they mentioned Groot and Drax of the Guardians here, but where's my boy Rocket? Maybe they don't want to buff Rocket because they're finally going to release the Rocket Raccoon (parentheses rabies) edition of Rocket that I've been requesting for years now. Kabam, man! What's taking so long on this Halloween version of Rocket? 2020, maybe it's the year. Probably not. But okay, anyway, moving on to the actual changes. So I think Maw is still mostly going to be a defender, and that's kind of what they talk about here. They say that in many ways players were kind of ignoring his mechanics and just kind of crossing their fingers hoping for the best to get through the fight. And admittedly, that's how I got through the fight at first when fighting Maw, until I fought more difficult Maws, and then I did have to learn the mechanics of the character. But now it seems like you're going to, you're probably going to want to bring an actual counter to this guy. I'm going to kind of simplify a few of the changes here. First, let's talk about the Persuasion Timer. It's going from 0.7 seconds down to 0.5 seconds. That's the timer that ticks up on you when you're fighting against Maw, that is. Where at intervals of 20, that's when you can't hit. You gain the default or debuff, and if you try to attack Maw, you're going to miss. So yeah, it's you're essentially the window of time that you're going to have to be able to attack is shortened. So it makes it that much more important to have a character that can get around the miss mechanic, or just, you know, plow through the champion in some other way. Also, his degen is getting amplified quite a bit. The base value of the degen is increasing, along with the fact that the degen is being changed to be affected by modified attack instead of base attack, which means, you know, right now in the current version of the game, you fight him in Alliance War. It doesn't matter what node he's on, whether it has plus 0% attack or plus 100% attack. The degen damage is dealing the same amount, but once this update goes live, if the node has plus 100% attack, it's going to be doubling Maw's degen. Or think of other nodes like Counter Tactics that, you know, builds up Maw's degen. So it could actually be pretty nasty to deal with. So you're gonna want to find a way to counter that. Offensively, I'm not going to break down exactly how Maw works. I did actually relearn how to play the character offensively, and I see some promise. You know, his damage output, I think, is still going to be a little bit on the weaker side. Typically, when you're playing a Mystic champion, you don't have the Suicide Masteries. That would be the largest way to offensively modify the degen. Sometimes you do, but a lot of cases you don't, because you're already putting points in Mystic Dispersion, or you want to be spamming your specials, and Suicides don't really mesh well with that. So I don't think his damage output is going to be too great, but there is a line here where they're changing it so that his Awaken ability is also going to modify that degen, and the way that's going to work with this change to the Deterioration passive, that's going to increase that as well. And then the potency of Black Tongue is going up from 40% to 30%. Black Tongue is when the Persuasion Timer reaches 100, which is its max. Then if you're playing Maw against the opponent will be inflicted by Black Tongue, which is going to reduce all power gain by, in this case, 40%. And that's permanent just for the rest of the fight. So combined this, where you're reducing the opponent's power gain by 40%, along with Ebony Maw's already his other power controlling mechanics. He has a power control on his heavy attack, power control with his special 3. He actually drains the opponent's power completely on his special 3. I could see Ebony Maw being a pretty solid power control champion to use offensively. Now, the one thing that kind of makes me think or just something interesting that I thought of is that, Maw could have had a much bigger impact on the game had he been better when released. I don't blame the devs. I'm sure they have a very short time to work on all this stuff and release this content, so they're not always going to get it right on the first try. But just thinking about it now, where we've seen a few other Mystic champions get released, and the popularity of some of these, like Doom, just growing, and anyone who has Doom probably isn't going to care as much about Ebony Maw. Or even if you do care about Maw, you might no longer have those Mystic rank up resources to give to a champion like this. So kind of just makes me think, like, what could have been? How would the game have looked? How would it have been shaped a little bit differently if more players had this version of Maw upon release? And what kind of content they could have completed with them. But in any case, we'll have to see. There's a lot that's changed here, so it's hard for me to gauge exactly how annoying Maw is going to be on defense. I honestly, I think he's going to be an extremely difficult champion on defense, unless you bring a counter. If you don't have a good counter to him, then the amount of degen you're going to be taking in Alliance War, or even just some questing nodes, is going to be pretty steep. So yeah, bring a counter to Maw, and then yeah, of course we'll test him once these updates go live offensively. The one thing I want to point out is if you happen to look up a Maw in game right now, something to be aware of is I think there's a bug currently with Maw. If you go to leaderboard here and take a look at HQ Sean, check out his profile. He has a 6-star rank 2 Sig 200 Maw. And you can see the third bullet point of his Awaken ability there. It says, when Ebony Maw inflicts a degeneration, all deterioration passives are consumed, each increasing the potency of the degeneration by 998%. So 1,000% of an increase. And if you look at the deterioration in his abilities at the top there, you could stack up to 20 deteriorations on the opponent. So yeah, what is that? It increased by 20,000%? That has to be a bug. Unless I'm just misunderstanding. I think that's bugged. Otherwise, Ebony Maw would actually deal the most insane degen damage ever. But yeah, I think that's a bit bugged. So don't get too excited when looking at that. Or scared, I should say. Because, yeah, it also can have an effect when you're fighting against him as well. Anyway, moving on. Now we're getting into the really interesting stuff with some of the champions that are getting toned down. And here's where I'm going to start to kind of disagree with what Kabam's doing for these champions. So Cull Obsidian, let's move along to his changes before we go through some of this data that they've provided. The actual changes that are being made, they're actually going to be increasing his DPS in early fights before he has built up charges, and then they're going to be decreasing his maximum potential when he does get built up. So really, it's not the craziest nerf to a character I've ever seen. I don't think it's going to have too much effect on the game in general, and that's kind of where my problem lies, honestly. I mentioned that I like balance updates in general in games because I feel like they make the games better. And here I feel like there was a missed opportunity to make the game better by doing this change that largely I don't think is going to have much of an effect on the game at all. And yeah, let's go through some of the data. Actually, I'll read through the changes here, and then we'll go through the data, and that kind of explains why they're making these changes. So the armor break, the heavy attack armor break, the actual armor value is going down a little bit, but the duration is actually increasing, and the chance to inflict armor break is also increasing. The way that Cull Obsidian works, however, is once you get him built up, he gains these Thanos' favor bonuses that affects the duration and ability accuracy per charge of the heavy attack armor break. So that's why some of these values are going up, and yeah, that is a nice buff for when the character is not built up. But as you get him built up, it doesn't scale quite as well as it used to. His signature ability is also changing. The duration is going from 5 to 4 seconds, and the attack modifier is going down a bit as well. Cull's still going to hit pretty hard once you get him built up, but of course the downside to Cull Obsidian is that he doesn't really have much in the way of utility.
and also low block proficiency. So while you're trying to get these heavy attack armor breaks going, and generally in fights, you're taking more damage playing Cull Obsidian than the average champion. But they have some data here to say otherwise, sort of. So let's go up to the top, and we'll break down these charts here. So the first chart is showing Cull compared to Ronin and Venom. So Cull is on the left side here, Ronin is in the middle, and Venom's on the right side. And there's two triangles for a reason. They're saying that the orange triangle represents their DPS, and the blue represents their damage done versus damage received, and higher is better. So this is the first fight of a quest where you don't have any persistent charges. And you can see Cull Obsidian, he underperforms compared to Ronin and Venom. And this is just, like I said, DPS and then DPS compared to damage done versus damage received. So let's move on to this next chart, where this is the final fight in Realm of Legends after Cull has been fully ramped up. And you can see that, not only is his damage done very high, but the damage done in relation to damage received is also very high compared to the other characters. And the reason for this, they're explaining that, basically the best defense is a strong offense. If you're able to take out the opponent in fewer number of hits, then you're also you also don't have to block as many hits, and you also don't have to bait out as many specials and risk getting hit by the enemy specials. So in general, that is how they're justifying keeping his defensive stats as is. They're not changing Cull's defensive stats at all, even though a lot of people were requesting some increased block proficiency, or in my case, I was requesting a different way to buff the character defensively as well, but they're not going to be doing that. The next chart that they're showing here is based off of player experience level. They have the top 10 percent on the left column here, top 30, top 50, top 70, top 90, and they're showing that the less experienced players can't really take advantage of Cull's abilities. It's the champions are all pretty much about the same, but the more experienced you get, not only are you getting better with any champion that you play, but you can see that Cull Obsidian, the gap between the other champions is just going up exponentially here. So they want to kind of reduce this gap a little bit. The next chart here, this was Realm of Legends, by the way. This chart, Realm of Legends. This next one is showing Cull's DPS versus other high damage dealing champions throughout Act 6, and they're also showing it by experience level. And in this case, they're also comparing Aegon, Domino, Hyperion, Ronin once again, and Captain Beardo. And you can see as the player's experience level is not very high, it's just a cluster. They're all about the same. But again, as player experience increases, you could see that Cull, once again, is quite a bit higher than these other characters. So yeah, they're just looking to close that gap a little bit. But, the thing is, there's a reason why those other champions get ranked up, and the data that is missing that I would have preferred to see is just how many people have actually ranked up Cull compared to these other characters. And also, they mentioned that Cull is being used throughout Act 6. I want to see exactly which fights is he being used for. Is it just the easy fights where you actually can use him, because you can't really use him against stun immune or debuff immune, not very effectively at least. Any nodes that have any type of poison or bleed damage or anything like that. There's so many places that you can't even use Cull, where it's so difficult to even get him ramped up. So I'm curious exactly which fights. We also don't have data on masteries that are used or what boosts are being used, because some champions scale better with boosts compared to others. And I get that Kabam can't share every piece of information they have about Cull. I also understand that not every single champion is created to be the next god of the contest, and that's part of what makes this game fun. First off, we don't know which champions are good or bad. That's part of the game, is figuring out which champions are better than the others to use and spend our resources on. And then when you're opening up your crystals, you don't know whether you're going to pull a crappy champion, an average champion, or a champion that's going to break the game wide open for you and allow you to get allow you to reach that next point of progression, allow you to complete that next quest that you've been struggling with. And every single player is dealt a different hand, essentially, of these champions, and it's also up to us to determine how best to play our unique hands and how we're going to be ranking up our champions. But Cull, I'm having a hard time figuring out where Cull fits into it all. According to the data, he's not good for new players. If you can't take advantage of Cull's DPS, what does he have going for him? So you might as well play some of the other champions. And then as time goes on, where Cull can excel and can gain this higher DPS over other champions, you have more and more opportunities to open crystals and pull these other champions that players are ranking up, because they do need the other abilities that Cull is lacking and the survivability that Cull is lacking. So who is Cull good for? You know, his character model is awesome, so he's good for the person that just wants to play with the coolest looking character, which is how I started out wanting to play this game. He's maybe good for the person who just started a secondary account, who already has mastered parrying and stuff like that. But, you know, in a lot of ways, Cull just, I feel like it's just a missed opportunity. You know, I'm not really disappointed with the changes that are being made to Cull here. I think it's fine. I think in some ways it's justified, but only if they also, if they throw this dude a bone, you know, if they throw Cull a bone and just give him just buff him in some other way. You know, it's nice that they're increasing his damage in the early fights. It's a good change to kind of offset things here a little bit, but it's not enough. Cull needs more, and it goes back to what I said, where you know, I like balance updates because generally they make the game better, but in this case, I just see the game staying the same. I see Cull being a champion that's not very relevant, and he's staying that way. If you're a Cull fan out there, then hey, don't let my opinion affect how you feel about Cull. Keep using Cull and everything, but if you ranked up Cull and you do find yourself not really using the champion, then personally I would take this opportunity to sell the champion only during the time here. Of course, test out the changes for yourself, but yeah, I would personally sell the champion between the 10th and 24th and get my resources back, and then just call it a day from there. Move on, rank up a different champion. Again, not really because of the nerf, but because I just didn't really value Cull to begin with. Okay, moving on to Namor. This video is getting pretty long here, so I'm going to try to go a little bit quicker. Well, that's probably not going to happen, but we're going to skip ahead along to the actual changes here. There are two changes being made to Namor. His medium attacks, they have a chance to inflict bleed on the opponent, and that's being increased from 30% to 60%, which sounds like a buff. But the way Namor's abilities works is he has a chance to cause bleed on medium attacks, and when you fail to trigger bleed on those attacks, you gain an outrage charge. And you need to hit 30 outrage for Imperious Rex to automatically activate, or you need 15 charges to manually activate Imperious Rex, and that's when you go berserk and you're able to spam your specials and do all the crazy damage that Namor is capable of dealing. And this change is not really going to have too much of an effect on it. First off, there's a lot of bleed immune champions in this game where this doesn't even come into play. If you're fighting a bleed immune champion, as long as you're not a robot, if you're fighting a bleed immune champion, you're always getting outrage on all of your medium attacks, so that's not changing at all. And then there's actually some cases where, you know, when you want to take advantage of Namor's Imperious Rex ability, you have to set up the fight in such a way that you can take full advantage of it. You know, typically you want to pop a special 3 before Imperious Rex activates, and you also want to make sure the opponent's power meter is drained. This way, when you're trying to activate your special, the opponent isn't activating theirs, preventing you from activating yours. So sometimes it could be nice to have this little bit of extra time to set up the fight the way you want. So I don't really see this as a nerf. It's, in some cases, you know, yeah, it's going to slow down you getting to your Imperious Rex, but only by a very, very small amount. You gain outrage charges in other ways. So I don't see it as much of a change at all, and in some ways, I actually welcome this. The next line here is that regeneration on specials, whenever you pop a special with Namor, you gain a little bit of your missing health back. And that is being decreased from 6% of missing health down to 3% of missing health, so it's being cut in half. And this is the change that I disagree with about Namor. Now, we're going to go through some of the data that Kabam has as to why they're doing this in just a moment, but first I want to explain that Namor, he has another way to heal as well. You can heal whenever you're suffering from a debuff, even if it's a damage-dealing debuff, as long as you have the willpower mastery and you're attacking the opponent, then you're not taking any damage, assuming you also have a maxed out signature ability. But even if you're running the suicide masteries, normally start of the fight you take all that damage, right? But if you're attacking the opponent, you don't take any damage. That's how Namor's Sig ability works. From any source, you take 0 damage. But because you still have the debuffs on yourself, you still heal. So he does gain some health back from that as well. So yeah, Namor, even when they're reducing the regen from this ability, if you run the Suicide Masteries or just in certain matchups, you are still going to be able to heal with Namor. But all right, let's go back up to the top here. And before we get to the chart, I want to read this line right here. They say they're going to be lowering his regeneration. The intention with the regen was to allow him to fight back against recoil and suicide masteries, but it's potent enough that he gains more health than he loses. And I feel like they had it right when they designed this character. Actually, when I'm spamming specials, I'm always taking more damage from recoil, because it's only a percentage of your missing health. So not only does your health have to be very low for you to get the full amount of this 6%, or close to getting the full amount of this 6%, but you also have a poison debuff on yourself that reduces the healing that you're getting back. So you're not, it balances out the damage you're taking from recoil a bit, but it doesn't fully prevent the damage from that recoil. It sort of does when you factor in popping special 3s, and yeah, it's pretty even. But if you're low and you're spamming special 2, special 1, things like that, you're gonna die if you have suicides and recoil. So yeah, I feel like they had it. I feel like they had it dialed in. I feel like they nailed it when they made Namor with their intention of fighting back against recoil here. They show though that his healing compared to other champions that have some type of regen, it's just way too high. Considering Namor excels in other areas of the game, he has that high damage output, that explosive damage output once you pop Imperious Rex, and his signature ability being so powerful, they feel like this is just making the character just too powerful overall. And if there were a bunch of other top champions getting nerfed, I would say, okay, I understand. But in this case, oh man, okay, let me explain it like this, I guess. So this chart, I feel like it just doesn't paint the whole picture of the champion. And something that I'm not sure about when I'm looking at this chart is if these are showing any overhealing values or not, which ultimately is my fault. Kabam, they did a great job of putting this data together to show us all this data and why they're making the changes and everything. And I should have reached out. I should have asked them the question if this is tracking any overhealing. But right now, it's the nighttime. It's the weekend. I'm not going to get a response by the time this video goes live. So, yeah, I don't know if this chart is showing overhealing values. And what I mean by overhealing is think about Wolverine. Think about Wolverine with a regeneration buff. If he's missing some health, you see a green number pop up next to the champion to show how much health he's gaining every half second. But as soon as Wolverine hits 100% health, he gains that full yellow bar. That green number goes away, right? And I don't know if that's just a UI thing, or if under the hood it's still keeping track of those healing values. It probably is, and it probably is included in this data. But I'm just not 100% sure, just because I don't think it says it anywhere here. But it probably is keeping track of it, but I don't know. All I know is something feels off when I look at this, thinking about how Namor works. And I guess that's why data is important, is because you can't always go by feeling. But one way or another, Namor, his healing, it does work differently from the average champion. You are gaining a lot of health throughout the fight because you are spamming a lot of specials with Namor. But you're not really gaining that health. Your health goes up, and then as soon as recoil ticks, your health drops down. So it's constantly going up and down like this, and really it's either evening out, like they say, or going down a bit, even though these healing numbers are triggering. So I think all of that information is being recorded here, and I think that's inflating the data. Not only that, but just the type of regen overall. The type of regen that Namor has, he's not really topping himself off. Not through his ability to heal with specials, at least. And because of that, because he doesn't have the ability to top himself off, it creates a different dynamic with Namor than compared to other champions with regen. If you're not recovering the chip damage that you're taking from block, which Namor has slightly below average block proficiency. It's pretty good, but a little bit below. So you do take a little bit more block damage. And also, it puts you in a position where you're very frequently below 50% health, where you cannot make a mistake. If you make a mistake, you eat a 5-hit combo, you're dead. Or you miss time evading a special, you're also dead. Versus other regeneration champions that can heal themselves to full, and then no longer, like if they make a mistake, they're not going to die from it, usually. So it's a very different type of regen. Even though the number is high here, I think it's being inflated, like I said, for the recoil reason, and then just the feeling that you get in-game of being low, but your specials kind of allowing you to hang on and close out the fight. I thought that was a really cool thing, and I think players that are running suicides, it's just going to make them play Namor a lot less, which is kind of disappointing. Let's go back up here and look at one last thing before we end this video. They say that when comparing Namor to champions like Quake or Ghost, they have a much higher skill threshold required to be as powerful as they are, while Namor's Imperious Rex is almost inevitable in a fight. As I explained before, about Imperious Rex, it can actually be tricky to set up in some cases. The more difficult the fight actually is, the more complicated nodes and abilities from the enemy just in general, the harder it is to take advantage of Namor's Imperious Rex ability. So I feel like Namor, yes, he's a bit easier to get into compared to champions like Quake or Ghost that take kind of relearning the game in a different way, since Namor is still like a 5-hit combo type of champion. I feel like when it comes to mastering the character, I feel like Namor is actually more difficult to master than Quake or Ghost. And I don't have data to back this up, but we see it all the time. Players take the path of least resistance when going through a quest. And what I see is players will sometimes avoid using champions like Quake. Maybe they don't like Quake, they're not confident in their ability to use Quake, something like that. And they will use a champion like Namor that is just a bit more comfortable, maybe they enjoy it more, whatever. And then they get to a fight that's truly difficult. And instead of saying, okay, I'm going to try my best with Namor here, they understand that it's going to be easier to get through the fight with Quake or Ghost or some other champions that are not mentioned here. I'm only talking about these two because these are the two that are mentioned here. They will go and learn how to play that champion just to get through that fight. Not because they want to learn how to play the champion in general throughout the game, but literally just to get through the most difficult fights. And if playing champions like Namor were easier than playing Quake or Ghost or whoever, then players just wouldn't do that. So, again, I think that, it does take time to learn how to play Quake and Ghost, absolutely, but once you have at least a proficient level, once you're proficient enough with Quake, she just gets around so many different things in this game, right? You no longer have to fight for map control. You no longer have to worry about the opponent's power meter, which also means that you don't have to learn how to evade the opponent's special. It plays around a large number of the special nodes in this game, or just special abilities that a champion already has. So, these characters are very popular for a reason. And I end up not using my Namor unless I need his Awaken ability. That's really the only time I use Namor. It's actually easier for me to use other characters than it is to use Namor. But Namor is very powerful. Like I totally agree with a lot of what's said here, that Namor is a super strong champion. In fact, even after this update, I know for a fact that I will not be ranking down my Namor. He's absolutely staying ranked up. But again, going back to what I said about I like balance updates because I feel like they make the game better. One of the ways I feel like balance updates make the game better is by evening out the distribution of how frequently a champion is played. Of course, some champions are always going to be stronger than others, and there's going to be more situations where one champion excels over another. And I don't want to take away anyone's favorite champion away from them. If you want to just play this one champion all the time, go for it. But what happens is certain champions are so strong in this game that nobody wants to play anything but the absolute strongest just because they tower over every other champion that much more, just in terms of how good the character is. And in some cases, to increase the desirability of certain champions, they have to buff them or rework them. And in some cases, I understand the need to lessen their abilities in some ways. Not totally take the champion away, not nerf them to the ground or anything like that, but just tone them down. And Namor, I don't think was at the top. I think he was near the top. I think he was a champion that could at least be compared to the likes of Quake and Ghost. The dude could on his tippy toes breathe the same air as these gods that he's being compared to here. But I don't think he was. I don't think he's as strong. And what happens is if you take away the power from the champions that are at least within reach of these other champions, it's just going to increase the rate at which they are played that much more, and decrease the rate at which Namor is being played. That distribution is not being evened out. It's going away from that, which I would like to I would like to see. I would like to see just more champions in general being more champions that players would actually want to play, rather than just kind of funneling everything in to this select group of champions. Just a little bit, just dissipate that a little bit. So because it's kind of going in that different direction, at least for right now. If Kabam does end up making other balance changes in the future to the champions that are even stronger than Namor, and just in general toning down certain champions, then I'll be more understanding of this change to Namor. But for right now, at least, I don't really like it. Like I said, I feel like they had the balance right. I feel like this chart just doesn't paint the whole picture of the type of healing that you're getting with Namor. It's not like you're topping yourself off, and I think the chart is being inflated by the spikes that you have up and down whenever you're popping a special while using the Suicide Masteries. And of course, he does heal from specials without the Suicide Masteries too, so in some cases, he's just gaining health, but still, it's always part of missing health. So, I feel like that chart just doesn't tell the whole picture. That's why I disagree with the changes that are being made to Namor. But in general, overall, I am a fan that Kabam is making some sort of effort to change the balance in the game. Like I said, I am a fan of balance updates just in general in games, and in past games that I've played as well, there's definitely been updates that I didn't agree with, and that's just how it is. They're making the best decisions that they can make based off of their personal experience with the game, along with all of the data, plus more data than what's being shown here even. So, I do disagree with this change to Namor, and then I'm also disagreeing with the change to Cull. More, not really disagreeing with this change to Cull, just disappointed that there's not more of a change to Cull. So, a little bit bummed out there. Again, I'm not going to be ranking down my Namor. If I did have a Cull, I would rank him down, but not because of this change, just because I didn't really value him that highly as a character before the change. Ebony Maw is probably going to be the champion that players see the biggest change in, just in general, especially fighting against him in war. If you haven't learned how to play Maw, learn and start ranking up a counter. And then, the rest of the changes, overall, I just like the direction they're going, especially with the type of changes they're making to Annihilus here. That's going to do it for my review of the balance update. If you made it this far into the video, man, all I could say is thank you for watching, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Take care.